But to bring it back to Syria, just to give you guys a very simple background, Bashar al-Assad, I mean, dude, not the greatest fucking leader. Let's be honest. He's not the greatest dude, but he is opposed to Western imperialism. If you go back through his family, they go into what we call a Ba'athist socialist party.
Yeah.
That's what they considered themselves. Ba'athist in Arabic, if you don't know, it means resurrectionist, right? So it's quote unquote revolutionary. So these people were Arab nationalists who are tired of Western imperialism basically dictating what their lives are, and they're trying to basically take all of their, political, economic, blah, 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 into their own hands. And early on in Syria, there was if you read into it, there's just coups every other week in Syria for the past 50, 60 years. So this is nothing new to these people.
Yeah, I mean, there's been
eventually it came to the point where the Ba'athist party basically took hold after a few coups, and the Baathists consider themselves socialist. And again, this is where things kind of there's a gray area. You consider yourself a socialist, but are you actually implementing Marxist ideals, communist ideals, socialist ideals? And over time, this Ba'athist party in Syria, which is also tied to the Ba'athist party of Iraq, mind you, the Ba'athist party of Iraq came out with Saddam Hussein. So just throwing that out there. These people had this socialist ideal, but also this Arab nationalism where they wanted to unite all of the Arab nations together to basically create this stable environment where they cannot be influenced nor subjugated to Western ideals. They had their own power, blah, 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 blah. Over time, the Ba'athist party in Syria actually kind of split into two. One was the ideologues. It was two main people. I can't remember their name. And then the other two major characters were the military portions of the Ba'athist party. And one of them was Hafiz al-Assad. Yeah, that was Bashar al-Assad's dad.
Okay.
Right. And that's basically how that's how the Assad family came into power, was basically through this split in the Ba'athist party in Syria, where the military kind of just had more power than the ideologues. Over time, a lot of the people in Syria, especially the mercantile class and the people that had immense amount of power and wealth in Syria, were kind of revolting because of some of the socialist ideals that they're trying to implement. And with Bashar al-Assad's dad, he kind of liberalized the economy a little bit to kind of ease tensions. And it kind of just went downhill from there from a socialist perspective. They never really regained any Marxist footholds, anything like that.
Yeah.
And that kind of brings us to today, where this Assad family had, problems with Israel, just like every other Arab country. They had multiple wars. They allied themselves with multiple characters and organizations throughout the Middle East to basically take on Israel. And this is what really brought them to making enemies with the U.S. Because if you're an enemy with Israel, you're the enemy with the U.S. And so if you really think about it, who's going to be your natural ally at that point? It's going to be the USSR and Russia today. And that's how we come to this kind of strategic alliance between Russia and Syria today.
Yeah, Russia's been a really true friend to Syria for a long time. Russia's been fighting in Syria alongside Syria in their civil war for since the beginning. It's what I think one of the longest sustained conflicts Russia's been in recent history.
Correct.
And yeah, I mean, it's been Russia and Syria kind of against their detractors for a long time. And yeah, I would agree with you that I'm not the Assad's biggest fan in terms of politics and stuff, but I will say that I do I'll stand with Assad against Western imperialism. Just I'm not I fuck Putin. I don't agree with. I'm not a Putin fan. I don't support Putin.
I noticed a lot of socialists and communists want to fucking put Daddy Putin on a fucking pedestal.
I'm not one of those, but I will say
either.
But I will step back and say that if Putin and Assad want to kind of challenge Western hegemony, then I'll stand with that. I'll stand with their
Correct.
I'll stand with their attempt to like push back against the like imperial core of like the Western hegemony.
Yeah.
So like it would be like an alliance of convenience, I guess I would
it's
say.
not a black and white.
It's not a black and white thing, but like were it to come down between like Russia or the U.S., I would stand with Russia, or Syria or the U.S., or Syria or Israel, I would stand with Syria.
I would stand with neither between.
Well,
Russia and the
that's
US,
what
to
I
be
guess that's
honest
fair, but
with
like,
you. I
but you see my
see.
point.
Yeah, I completely see your point. You're just opposed to Western imperialism.
Yeah.
I totally get it.
And if they oppose that, and if they go further than oppose that and
Yeah.
fight it, then I am not going to sit and judge them for fighting.
Oh,
Western
absolutely not.
imperialism.
And that's like why we were backing it on for the longest time while this whole conflict was going on between Israel and
again, that's
Iran,
another
not
good
Iraq.
example, right? I'm not
Yeah.
the biggest fan of Iran. However,
Iran's domestic policies with being
their own
really
social-
anti-liberal human rights
problems, yeah.
Dude, we're not gonna ignore that, but what we will say,
I'm not going to apologize, or I'm not going to defend it for sure.
absolutely not. There are a lot of problems in Iran's
Yeah.
political atmosphere where a lot of women don't have a lot of rights.
Yeah.
Although minorities in Iran actually fare fairly well. I mean, the Jewish community,
that's true of most Muslim communities. Like most Muslim countries
yeah.
don't really have the same kind of like minority or racial issues that like
Yeah.
Western or Christian
Although
or
I would
Judeo-Christian,
say
nations do.
I would say Syria, Iraq does.
Yeah, okay.
And those are the two things and why there's so much conflict going on right now. As if you remember, if you watched way back in our episode, I think it was episode 2 or 3, we talk about the Sykes-Picot Agreement.
Well.
These countries were basically formed from lines drawn on a map from Western imperialist states post World War One.
Yeah.
England, France, and a bit of Russia, but
Yeah,
it's
it was
mostly
Russia at the
England and
time,
France. So basically, they drew lines on a map, forgetting about like major fucking ethnic minorities or ethnic majorities. Because if you remember, Iraq, Turkey, Iran, even parts of I think Armenia, Syria, they all have this huge ethnic group of Kurds. And if you don't know, Kurds are like literally the largest ethnic group of like 40 million people that don't have their own recognized states, right? And then we from there we can move to, there's a lot of Sunnis in Syria, and then we move to Alawites of Syria, the Druids of Syria. So Syria is a plural cultural state, and it's that way because these lines were drawn on a map. If there were better like treaties and better things that were planned more properly, where they gave Kurds their space, they gave these people their space, I think there would be no civil war, or there would practically be no problems for the most part, besides Israel trying to intervene in things. But that's not what they wanted.
Yeah.
The whole reason why they drew that up is because, and this is a lot of problems with a lot of things where the Baathists are actually have a correct opinion on, which they don't have too many correct opinions on, in my opinion. The whole point of their Arab nationalism is not to show superiority to other people. It's just to create a stable state where Arabs are not worried about Western imperialism taking over, other different types of countries taking advantage of them. And that's why in, I think it was 1961, Egypt and Syria united into one country.
Yeah.
The United Arab Republic.
Right.
And they're, I think they put Iraq in there too. And this was under, God, what's his face?
The Egyptian president?
Yeah, Nasser. This is
Nasser,
from
yeah.
under Nasser.
Yeah.
Syria had problems with this because once Egypt, and you have to remember, Egypt is a large country. This country right now has close to 100 million people. Syria is like, what, 15 million?
Yeah.
20 million? So
I think they're about equivalent in land size, but Syria just has a lot less people.
I wouldn't even say that.
Maybe
I would say in
pull it up.
fertile land, they're
Like arable
equivalent,
land, yeah.
because Egypt's mostly desert, right? But the problem a lot of Syrians had were that Egypt looked at them. They almost felt like Egypt kind of like accumulated their land and their people and their country into Egypt, and they were one country.
Syria is like a quarter the size of Egypt in land mass.
Yeah. And so a lot of these Syrians felt like they were just being consumed by Egypt and not equal standing in power. And so that United Arab Republic kind of fell apart very quickly, which caused a lot of civil disarray, caused a lot of like coups going on again. So they've been going on for, since independence, 70 years ago, 80 years ago, they've been basically in turmoil, right? And now we come to the point of ISIS.
The elephant in the room.
The elephant in the room. So ISIS was a multicultural Islamic empire where a lot of Muslims, crazy religious zealots, decided to go into northwestern Iraq and northeastern Syria and basically claim a plot of land and just start basically doing a gruesome campaign all over the Middle East. And they did quite well for themselves, unfortunately. And these people are hyper religious. These people are fucking gross when it comes to mistreating artifacts from ancient history. I've watched videos of them destroyed like literally ancient cultures.
That's like
because they're like these are gods, these are pagan gods, blah blah blah. I'm like, dude, this is history. Nobody fucking believes this shit. And nobody believes that Apollo's up in the sky. And if you do, you're a fucking idiot. I'm sorry.
As a historian, and I imagine as an archaeologist, you can probably sympathize with this. Is like watching the destruction of like not only the Iraq War, but also like the Syrian war, like how many like Damascus being bombed and like how many priceless like historical just like buildings and artifacts, and like this is human history. This is like the birthplace of like humanity.
Exactly, because you have to remember Syria and Iraq were literally the cradle of civilization.
That was Mesopotamia, and like
the Syrian, also not to mention the Assyrians that live.
The Assyrian Empire, like all
which
of
is
these,
not Assyrian, they're Assyrian.
No, the Assyrian Empire. Just like this is like kind of some of the earliest civilizations, and like
Aleppo being bombed to fucking shreds.
Oh yeah, I remember like Aleppo was bombed in like 2016 or whatever, and
Damascus
I was like,
is one of the oldest cities standing.
Yeah,
right?
Baghdad is like a ruin of what its former self, and like these are like some of the old. These cities are like 8,000 years old or whatever, and it's like 6,000 years old, and it's like this is like some of the earliest recorded human history, and like the human artifacts are just being destroyed.
Yeah,
and that's really neither here nor there, but as a historian, I'm like, no, please, I wanted to go there someday and see these.
Yeah, well, they're destroying history. So the point is, it's not that ISIS, was destroying history or this or that. The point is like these people, they had almost this innate lack of education where they were just basically smothered by really hyper religious thoughts, where anything that wasn't the way they thought should be destroyed and annihilated, almost like a Pol Pot kind of thing. You know what I mean? I think that this is also speculative. I don't think that they were Israel, because the people like ISIS is Israeli secret intelligence service, blah blah blah.
No, I'm not that conspiratorial,
right?
Yeah.
But that you have to come to the acknowledgement that if they did so much shit to stop Saddam Hussein, they did so much shit to stop Gaddafi. They invaded so many countries, but when it came to ISIS, they let them roam. Basically, they let them roam the countryside, destroying things, and they could easily stop them. And they were using that as like basically political pawn. Basically, as it's basically just a proxy war, because they're funding the Kurdish forces to fight ISIS, but then Turks hate the Kurdish forces, but the Turks also don't like ISIS. And then the Iraqi militias were being funded by the Iranians, right, and trying to fight ISIS. And then now they're mad at Iran trying to get involved to take out ISIS, but they hate ISIS as terrorists. The Syrian government is there, just trying to survive, blah blah blah. It's you can see like the political distraught that's going on in the area, and they're letting it happen. The Western imperialists are letting it happen purposely so the place does not have stability. And that comes back to like the Baathists were keep saying, is like, we just want our national stability. Mm-hmm. But then they turn out somebody like Saddam Hussein, who basically conducts an ethnic genocide on Shia minorities. And so it's just like there is no good character here. There is no happy character.
Yeah, there's no
bring it back
ending.
to like, Bashar al-Assad was not the greatest fucking president, was not the greatest fucking leader. However, just like before, the amount of people Saddam Hussein killed was not even close to the amount that America, the United States, bombed the fuck out of Iraq. It's over 1 million people dead, right? Libya, Gaddafi, as much as you like or hate Gaddafi.
Yeah, rest in peace, Gaddafi. He was. I think he was actually kind of one of the better ones.
I think he was one of the better ones, right? He had his fucking things that were not that great either, but he also gave his people the highest standard of living on earth.
Yeah,
and what
he
happened,
was like
stability.
Libya's Sankara, basically. Like not quite to the like.
And he's not a socialist. He's not a socialist.
He wasn't
either.
even that socialist. Yeah,
right?
Or like he was just a competent leader.
Yeah, but he was also somewhat of a humanitarian. He allowed people to have basically free electricity, free water, whatever they needed. He allowed to give his people, but there was no power of the people, and people didn't like that. And America and Western imperialists basically used that to fucking essentially fund groups and forces in Libya to create dissent,
Yeah.
right? And once they took Gaddafi out, there was basically open slave markets in Libya. So yes, even if you say Gaddafi was not a fucking great leader, not a great person, he was this, he was that, he was a dictator, everybody in that country was living life of leisure, life of luxury.
A lot better than they had been before him, and a lot worse.
It was
or a lot
known to
better
be the best
after
standard
him.
of living on earth. So it's like, yeah, he might not agree with his political ideology, but he's not he's not like mass killing people in his country. He's not creating turmoil. And then what happens? Now Libya is literally an open slave market, basically. So what was worse? You could have just kept the guy and maybe made some fucking agreements with him. Now either they did it to Saddam Hussein. Now fucking Iraq is literally like political corruption, and it's not like it wasn't before, but now there's like no agreement. Nothing is being built. They at least they had a stable country under him, and now it's not stable, and the country is blown up. And now Syria's
going to be the same way.
It's going to be the same way.
To fall, yeah.
So it's like this repetitive historical moment where you're like, we can kind of just say what's going to happen. Afghanistan. How many we funded the Mujahideens in Afghanistan, and they turned around and basically fucking declared war in America.
Well, that's kind of the funny thing about the Syrian fighting is that like one half of the fighting in Syria was funded by like the CIA, and the other half was funded by like the DoD, and it's just like both sides of that conflict are funded by America. And there's like a darker side to this too, which we haven't touched on. The Syrian issue is that now, like the parasite that it is, Israel smells this blood in the water, and they're pushing in. And Netanyahu is called to double the population of settlements in the Golan Heights, pushing into.
He's actually pushed past this whole.
They're past the Golan Heights. Apparently, they're now an hour from Damascus, and have excursioned. I don't know if you can use that as a past tense verb. They have incurred. They're in Damascus. They've taken Damascus. So as I understand, they've since like backed from like actually holding Damascus.
Yeah.
But they're like posted up an hour. They're in a village an hour from Damascus as of like 10 hours ago. Yeah. And they're just staying there, and they're pushing in. That's pretty far.
Yeah, that's so far. That's
like many miles
hundreds
from
of
their
miles.
northeast border. Yeah.
Hundreds of miles. And their whole idea behind why they did that is to create a so-called buffer zone. Mm-hmm. The Golan Heights was supposed to be the buffer zone. Mm-hmm. Right now, this is basically just colonialization of Syria, because
just
once Assad
on chaos, and it's a real estate grab. It's literally a land grab. It's just pushing in. It's what we did to I say we as colloquially as it was what America did to like the native people that are here. You rush in, you divide, conquer, which was what they have done, and then rush in, land grab, and then build condos on it and make a killing. Yeah. And that's what they're doing.
Exactly what they're doing. Yeah. You know,
and this isn't like it's literally not their country. They just like are stealing another country because there's no real leadership or no kind of chain of command.
And they have no say. Be like, oh, this was part of Israel historically.
Yeah,
this part was never part of Israel historically, and so like. Now I was like, who's really going to believe you, man? Like at the end of the day, it's like you're claiming you're doing all this to create what Israel was at one point, but now you're going outside of the boundaries of what Israel was. So what's your excuse this time? And it's to create a buffer zone. Shut the fuck up. Like we know exactly what happened
that anymore. Yeah.
So
this is like a super interesting story that's unfolding, and like you mentioned, what happened with Iraq, what happened with Libya, what happened with most African countries or in most South American countries, any country that kind of has like some either socialist or humanitarian angle leader that was killed. Chile, it gets meddled with. Rebel groups or civil war, but which are always code for like U.S. backed or Western backed like forces.
Yeah,
overthrow or somehow depose. At least Assad isn't assassinated. At least he's still alive. So there's a hope for like him taken back over again or something. Maybe one day. All of these countries, they always follow the same pattern as they fall into just extreme chaos, just like death and strife and disease. Much worse than like was ever in place prior to their fall in the first place. So I don't know. We'll see what's happening.
I do want to talk one last point about this.
What you got?
I want to talk about the current rebel group that is now holding Syria hostage, basically.
So like the ISIS-backed group, or like mean?
So this is where kind of we are in the middle of the fog of war.
Yeah.
These rebels, they were not necessarily funded by the U.S., but they're kind of pushed as like, oh, these guys, this is better than Assad, and they're kind of backing the rebels in a certain way. Let's talk about the leader. The leader, if I can find his name, Abu Muhammad al-Jalani. So
Al-Jalani sounds familiar. Was he? Has he been around for a while? Is he like a
Yes.
figure? Okay.
Yeah, he's been around for a little bit. He was formerly an Al-Qaeda member.
Yeah. Okay. I think
This
that's why
is he was openly formerly an Al-Qaeda member, and he has come out recently to say he's in favor of pluralism, of multicultural, multicultural haven for Syria. Blah 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 blah. This guy listen. Once you're an Al-Qaeda member, once you're a Nazi member, once you're a member of such a like extremist group of nationalists and stuff, you're always that. There's always that hint in the back of your brain, and he's trying to reassure the world leaders that he's not going to conduct some crazy fucking shit like ISIS is. But like I said, once you're a leader of Al-Qaeda, you're going to have a knack. Even if you did change, you're going to have a sympathy for things that you still think would be better under that sort of ideology.
Yeah, for sure.
And I just find it funny. I was like, yeah, sure, bro. Yeah, you totally multiculturalism. Yeah, we'll see what happens.
We'll see how that goes.
We'll see what happens. But these rebels are Sunni fundamentalists.
Yeah.
Right. These are Sunni fundamentalists, just like Saudi Arabia is a Sunni fundamentalist. Just like Al-Qaeda is a Sunni fundamentalist, just like ISIS was a Sunni fundamentalist, right? So any religious government is a no-go in my point, and this is coming from a person who grew up in a Muslim household. Religion and government should not exist together,
the opposite
right?
Is bad.
It's always bad. It's always bad. And this is one of the fucking fallbacks of Assad's regime. Assad's government, whatever the fuck you want to call it. He was an Alawite. He was a minority. And a lot of the Syrians were constantly complaining that this minority of the Alawites had way too much political power because the majority of the political power was held by this ethnic minority, right? And so that created this not even fear or not even like hate, but like
just tension.
This tension to make sure the majority has the power again. And people like this guy will use that to his advantage to make himself look like he is
this natural successor, this like chosen leader.
Yeah, not even a natural successor, but like he is going to bring back balance the power back to the majority of the people, like this democratic elected haven. And I'm like, okay, if you really want to be this democratically elected leader, hold elections. Yeah. Maybe not now, maybe a year later, year and a half. I'll give you some space and time.
I would be shocked if there were elections.
Yeah, but even if there were, you know, the U.S. is going to meddle into that and place somebody in power that's going to be pro fucking America. Yeah, so this is all bad. This is all bad. I'm telling you now, this is all bad.
We're definitely going to be keeping a pretty close eye on this because like every it seems like every like couple days we get like a new update. Like recently, like Israel just like pushing in, like out of nowhere, which is a little suspect and like leads me to believe that like that probably just proves the point that everyone kind of assumed, which was that like a lot of this was Western meddling, kind of like influencing or supplying or funding or in some way kind of like orchestrating this like this push. And so it sounds like with Israel just jumping on this so soon, like they were kind of primed for it. But
it's almost like they knew.
Yeah, I mean, and if not, they knew. But I mean, like Israel is like proven. I don't know if like. Well, I would probably venture to say they knew, but even if they didn't know, Israel's proven itself to be pretty opportunistic and like
correct.
They're gonna do what they're gonna do, and that's like land grab in Arab land that doesn't belong to them, or you know, not necessarily Arab, but just land that doesn't belong to them, and that's what they did. Yeah. So I don't know. We're going to be keeping a close eye on this. We'll
keep you guys updated. Again, it's the fog of war.
It's incredibly complicated, as you mentioned. This fog of war. It is really hard to find kind of like
really good information,
reliable information that's coming out of this that is not biased. It's like it's crazy to think like in 2024 that there would be like in just how interconnected the world is, there would be like a shortage of news on like a major global event, but it is kind of like hard to parse what's coming out of this.
I try to find as much information as I possibly
can. And also like there is like we all know mainstream media is like corporate owned and kind of like not to be relied on and not to be trusted, but there is reports and this is kind of a smaller thing, but like it was ABC or CBS or one of their affiliates or something was like filming part of what was going on in Syria, and they were directing the soldiers to remove ISIS patches and like remove any kind of patches that were like unfavorable or that Americans have an unfavorable view on. So it's like they're already trying to like, and that just not that that's that big a deal, but it definitely shows that like they're not
They're not.
they're not being
showing
unbiased. They're just like they're not showing the truth of it. They're twisting it to be more palatable to Americans. Which, if you're an honest journalist, you don't do that.
Exactly.
But also in relation to all of this too, Biden has now removed ISIS from like the terrorist watch list, like a terrorist group. ISIS is now our ally. I don't know if you saw that or not, but like Biden is now we're friendly to ISIS now because like they're our buddies again, I guess. Fuck, what? So like I don't know, and I don't know like the full details on that. I'll have to pull that up. But like,
again,
as I understand
just
it,
things are just coming out, so we're not trying to spew any misinformation out. We're just trying to put very basic information that almost everybody knows that you could find information on if you can find it, and basically just relay that information to you with our commentation.
Yeah.